Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in part 5 of the Transformers were in My Hero Academia. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 9, Hero Training. Normally, Mei Hatsume wouldn't be all that interested in pictures, except for schematics, of course. She couldn't get enough of those. But the picture that she held in her hands, one that Bumblebee had apparently drawn, was getting her excited. It was a face that belonged to yet another robot. The pink-haired inventor could barely contain herself and she grinned from ear to ear, using her zoom quirk in order to take in every detail of the drawing. Mei couldn't help but giggle to herself as her excitement continued to build, which began to unsettle her friends, who were standing behind her and watching with trepidation. Hatsume. Izuku asked reluctantly. Are you okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Mei pulled her face away from the piece of paper and whipped around to Izuku, Kyoka, and Bumblebee, the latter in his robot form. The trio jumped slightly at her sudden shout, but that didn't deter her from going on. I'm way more than okay, muscles. She showed them the picture and pointed directly at the unknown robot's face. Do you know what this means? Izuku and Kyoka glanced to one another hesitantly before the green-haired teen gave an answer. That Bumblebee is getting clearer memories. And that B is actually really good at drawing faces. Kyoka added as her eyes directed themselves squarely onto the piece of paper. I mean, dang, that is highly detailed. Mei then zipped up to the two and stood between them, putting her arms over their shoulders eagerly. Both very true. But there's something bigger here that you two are missing. She pointed to the picture again. You see this robot's face. See how slender it is and how its lips are fuller. It's clearly female. She got right into their faces with a huge grin. And do you know what that means? Izuku started, only for Mei to cut him off. It means that the theory that I've been cooking up is right. The Pinkett pointed up to Bumblebee, who recoiled slightly at the action. As we already know, whatever race of alien robots that B's a part of, they're much more than just robots. Rather, they're actually sentient, robotic organisms that have thoughts and emotions. Mei pointed at the picture again. And if this drawing is anything to go by, if B is remembering this bot correctly, then it's strong evidence to suggest that these robotic organisms also have gender as well. Kyoka blinked in surprise before glancing up to Bumblebee. I never did think about that. Why yeah, me either. Izuku concurred. I mean, the only two robots we've ever seen are Bumblebee and the one in the hologram, and that one actually had a male voice. Kyoka placed a hand to her hip, raising an inquiring brow to the drawing. So, here's the big question, how do robots even have genders? They don't really reproduce, do they? Mei scoffed at the idea. Of course not. Why would a robotic being need to reproduce for? She raised a single finger up to Kyoka. But the real answer as to how they have different genders is simple. Mei pointed to the drawing once again, physical, and most likely, mental differences. I mean, she waved her hand across the paper. This is bot clearly female, as I pointed out earlier, there's no mistaking it. So I'm betting that, just like how male and female humans have differing cognitive functions, so do male and female Transformers. Interesting. Kyoka mused before raising a brow. By the way, Transformers. Hey, do you have a better name for them, Jackie? Mei countered. No, but it is a bit on the nose. Kyoka smirked before going back to Bumblebee. So, B, do you have any other memory on who this girl bot is? Bumblebee furrowed his irises in thought, his optics laser focused on the picture he had drawn. Zeeked. I don't know, ZRKT, it's a mystery. All of a sudden, Bumblebee transformed into his vehicle mode and activated his holoform, the blonde boy getting out of the Beetle and reaching for the picture. A ponderous expression came to his face as he stared at it, his radio still going. I'm not all that sure, ZZRKT, how I remember you. Izuku tilted his head. Well, is there anything you are sure about? A slightly sheepish expression came to B's face before another song played. Zeeked. You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, it's true. At that, Kyoka's smirk only increased. I see. Whoever this girl bot is, you must think pretty highly of her, yeah. Zeeked. She's got the look. Kyoka clapped her hands and let out a small laugh. Haha. Oh my god, B's got a crush. The holomatter avatar immediately hid his face in his hands, trying to hide his face as Kyoka grasped his shoulders. Haha. Ah, don't feel embarrassed, B. I know this all must be a bit much for you all at once, but trust me, you're okay. Kyoka picked up the picture and pointed to it. Whoever this girl bot is, I'm sure she must be nice if you remembered her so well, so keep that in mind, okay? While B was still utterly nervous at what Kyoka had implied, he smiled at her words and nodded a little, pulling his hands away from his face. Good. So, if you remembered her this well, you think you can remember her name, if she has any. Once again, this put Bumblebee in a ponderous state, the blonde holoform grasping the piece of paper again as he sat down and attempted to recall just who this femme's name was. After a few minutes, Izuku came up and reached out. B, you don't have to. However, Bumblebee waved to him, not taking his eyes off the picture of a second. Wow, he seems really focused on that picture. Probably best to leave him like that, Izuku. Kyoka pointed out. I mean, he really wants to remember his past, so if this helps him do that, then we should leave him be for a while. Why yeah, you're right, Kyoka. Izuku nodded. W wouldn't wanna break his concentration. Off to the side, Mei placed her hands on her hips and tilted her head. Since when did you guys start calling yourselves by your first names? Realizing that they hadn't told Mei about the events of the first day yet, Izuku and Kyoka eyed one another once again before both of them sighed. The quirk inheritor rubbed the back of his neck and answered with, hee, it's a long story, Hatsume. Kyoka put her hands behind her back. Yeah, let's just say that things on the first day got a bit hectic. Oh, I know all about that. Mei said with a proud smile. Powerloader gave me and my class a project on the first day that called for all of us to create something unique, while also being small as well. So, I made these. Mei reached into her backpack and pulled out a set of small ball-shaped devices, catching Izuku and Kyoka's attention immediately. Muscles, Jackie, may I present baby number 95, my micro tracers. Whoa. That's so cool, Hatsume. Izuku said as he and Kyoka got a closer look. Did they really work? Well, kinda, Mei said awkwardly. I mean, they do work, but they also blew up during class. Kyoka facepalmed. Seriously. Hatsume, how did you manage to blow these tiny things up? You'd be very surprised at just how too much electricity powering such a small device can have such an explosive effect. Mei stated bluntly. But, the main takeaway from this project is that they do work. They just need their electricity output adjusted so that they don't blow up. She held up two of the small, ball-shaped devices. And once I do, I'm gonna make sure that every one of us has one on us. This managed to confound both Izuku and Kyoka even more. Why? So we can all find each other if we get into trouble, that's why. Mei clarified as she pointed to a small button that was on each of the tiny balls. See, when you press this button, it sends out a signal that's supposed to act as an alert in case you're in trouble. The Pinkett smiled brightly as she went on. I figured that we'd be able to use this in case any of us got into trouble or something so that we can all find each other. I mean, now that we're going to UA, you never know, right? Well, I guess you have a point. Izuku crossed his arms. Still, I don't know if there'll be any real danger when it comes to that Hatsume. UA is probably the most heavily guarded hero school, after all. Villains have very rarely broken in. Hey, better to be safe than sorry, Muscles. Mei chastised. Especially when we have B here with us. If the wrong person discovered him, we'd be in massive trouble. B's radio kicked on again, though his holoform was still studying his drawing intently. Zeked. Yeah, trouble now. I'm trouble y'all. Kyoka let out a sigh and nodded. Yeah, I guess you have a point there. Probably would be a good idea to have something that lets us all find each other just in case. She sent a knowing smile over to Mei and put a hand to her hip. Just, make sure that they don't explode. I'd rather not have something on me that could blow me up. Mei saluted with a cheeky grin. I only promise to try. And I think that's the best I'm gonna get. Kyoka chuckled before going over to her backpack and taking out the syllabus that they had gotten from class that day. Anyway, let's go over this paperwork like Mr. Aizawa said. I've got a feeling that we're gonna be in for quite the second day tomorrow if day one was like this. Izuku nodded and took out his own syllabus as well. Why yeah, I guess we'd better be prepared. Mei sat down at her workbench, placing the tracers on it before going for her tools. I'm kinda surprised that you guys got pulled into an off-the-cuff test right from the get-go. Whoever your teacher is, he sounds intense. A smile came to her face and she pointed over to them. Now, Powerloader. He's a great teacher so far. The first thing he told us is to literally make whatever we want. Said he didn't wanna put any limits on our creativity. Kyoka couldn't help but grin a little. Hey, well, knowing you, Hatsume, I bet you're loving that. Oh, you betcha, Jackie. Mei spun around in her seat and spread her arms out wide. It means that I can create as many babies as I want and I have no limit to what I can do with them. The school funds pretty much everything. Her hands went to her cheeks and a euphoric expression came to Mei's face. Ah, I could just die thinking about it. I'm gonna make so many good babies, you won't even know. Izuku let out a chuckle. Hee something tells me we will, Hatsume. He glanced back down to his syllabus and his eyebrows rose up. Oh boy. Kyoka raised a single brow. What's up, Izuku? Kyoka, tomorrow, we start our hero training courses. Hey, that's cool. Kyoka smiled. I'm pretty sure that All Might is teaching those, right? Izuku nodded. Why yeah, you're right, but we'll be doing actual combat training, and I still don't have a hang of my quirk yet. Kyoka pursed her lips and placed a hand on the green-haired boy's shoulder in reassurance. Okay, let's not panic here. Maybe we'll be in a scenario where we won't have to use our quirks. I can only hope. Izuku murmured. I mean, what if, slam. Ah. Both Izuku and Kyoka let out a yell as Bumblebee suddenly slapped his drawing down on the table in front of them, the blonde holoform wearing a serious expression. See, can we help you, B? The blonde made a scribbling motion over his drawing, which only confused the others more. Wait, you want to scribble out your drawing? B vehemently shook his head and did his scribbling motion again, this time in between the lines of the bot's face. Kyoka let out a small gasp and connected the dots. Oh. You wanna color it in? B nodded rapidly, pointing to his head for emphasis. You're remembering her more. That's great. Kyoka turned to Mei and asked, do we have any colored pencils or something, Hatsume? Actually, we do. Mei stood up and ran out of the garage, coming back a few minutes later with a small, plastic, blue box. My uncle keeps these around just in case he needs them. She handed the box to Bumblebee, who bowed his head before going back to his drawing. The blonde holoform opened the box, revealing a whole variety of colored pencils for him to choose. However, the ones he zeroed in on were a soft pink, a hot pink, white, and a bright blue. B took the softer pink pencil and began coloring in her face, careful to stay away from her rounded helm. Once the main face was colored, B took the hot pink pencil and colored in her lips before using the bright blue to color in her eyes. Finally, he took the white pencil and colored in her helm. Though there were a few details on her head buns he kept clear to color in with the hot pink pencil. Once he was done, he took the softer pink one again and wrote something down at the bottom of the picture, presenting it to the group once he was done. Whoa, okay, B. Kyoka nodded as she took a second look at the picture. You're definitely remembering more here. Why yeah, color is definitely a good step, Izuku agreed before directing his eyes down to the word below the face. But a name is even better. Both Kyoka and Mei nodded in agreement. There, underlined for emphasis, was a 5-letter word that the trio of humans made sure to keep memorized. RC, . The next day came, and Bumblebee had to admit, he was still utterly stumped. He was sitting in the UA parking lot, his holoform activated as he leaned out his window while holding his drawing in his hand. The more he gazed at it, the more he wanted to remember just exactly who this fembot was. However, outside of her face, her colors, her name, and the fact that she was apparently nice to him, he couldn't recall just who this, RC, really was. It was obvious that he must have had some sort of relationship with her, but he couldn't recall what it was. Friends, partners, good acquaintances, or was she as Kyoka had suggested last night? B was thankful that his holoform couldn't blush at the thought. Tap tap tap. B's eyes widened and his head spun around, only to be met with a window full of large abs in a red and white costume. However, a single second later, the figure bent down, revealing himself to be none other than, "I am here, peering through your window." B stumbled back in his seat, shocked at All Might's sudden appearance. "Ah ha ha. Apologies, Bumblebee. But you seemed a bit spaced out there." Bumblebee sent All Might an irritated yet questioning face, tilting his head a little. "Zeked. All Might. Zeked. What's the deal with that? Ah, you wish to know why I am here and not teaching, yes." All Might received a nod from B, ushering him to go on. "Well, the short answer is, I am teaching a class. However, I have a moment of reprieve while they are all getting changed into their hero costumes for their first training session." He extended an inviting hand. "I came here to ask if you would like to accompany me to ground beta in order to witness it. I'm sure you would like to see what young Midoriya and young Jiro are capable of." Bumblebee brightened up and nodded his head immediately. "Ha ha, excellent." All Might leaned down and whispered, "But remember, while in there, you are under the guise of Brian, my intern from America. You are there as an observer, so keep your interactions with the class, including Midoriya and Jiro, to a minimum, alright? We don't want any of them suspecting something." The blonde holoform nodded and gave a salute, to which All Might gave a thumbs up. "Very good. Now then," without warning, All Might picked Bumblebee up, meaning that he reached down and hoisted the Volkswagen Beetle right up over his head. Bumblebee had to resist the urge to transform to get out of the situation as All Might bent his legs. Off to ground beta. With that, All Might leapt up into the air, his hold on Bumblebee secure as he jumped right over to the other side of the campus. Kyoka Jiro loved her hero costume. It was exactly what she had been hoping for and even a bit more after all of the improvements that Izuku had suggested to her. She was donned in a pair of black pants, a black leather jacket with a salmon pink undershirt that had several rips in his hem, a pair of white fingerless gloves, a black choker, and a pair of large, black boots that each had a set of speakers in them. She had also painted 2 red, upside-down triangles under her eyes, adding a bit of extra detail. As for the added bits that Izuku had suggested, they consisted of 2 smaller speakers that were attached to bracelets on her wrists to allow for better aim with her sound waves, as well as a pair of blue and red headphones on her head for a bit of extra detail. Overall, her costume had come out better than it had hoped. So why was she feeling like the rest of the girls had her outclassed? All of them were wearing skin-tight bodysuits that emphasized their assets. Granted, both male and female heroes wore bodysuits like that, but all the same, it accentuated the body's details greatly, and because of that, Kyoka couldn't help but feel inadequate compared to everyone else. The pink girl, Mina, definitely seemed to be enjoying her new splotchy blue and purple costume, though the green-haired girl, Tsuyu Asui, seemed rather sheepish about her own green one. Heck, she was pretty sure that the invisible girl, Toru, was just wearing nothing but a pair of gloves and boots, meaning she was mostly naked. Is that even allowed? Kyoka then glanced over to her right, and her eyes bugged out at what she saw next. The ponytailed girl, Momo Yaoyorozu, was wearing a red leotard that had a very deep cut at the front of her body, going all the way down to her belly button while only just barely keeping her chest covered. Also, her arms and legs were pretty exposed as well, meaning that she had a lot of skin showing. Okay, how is that legal here? Pretty sure Midnight is wearing more clothes than her. Hey, Kyoka. Kyoka's eyes widened and her head spun around, seeing Ochako and Keita standing behind her. The brunette girl was wearing a helmet with a large, pink visor going over her whole face, and a black and pink bodysuit as well. We're all about to head out, you ready? Why yeah, sure. Kyoka assured before taking note of Keita. Surprisingly, while she was wearing a black bodysuit, one that had short pant legs that went halfway down her thigh, she was also wearing a sleeveless, black leather jacket over it. She also had a bright yellow belt settled across her waist with a large K emblazoned on it, and that was it. She wasn't even wearing boots, it was just her bare feet. Huh, your costume's a bit more simplistic than I thought, Keita. The Soro Parts user gave a small shrug. Yeah, with the kinda quirk I have, I can't exactly wear a whole bunch of stuff on me. Keita reached down and pulled on her bodysuit. Heck, this suit's pretty much the only part of my costume that's tailor-made to adapt to my quirk whenever I use it. The rest of this stuff is for aesthetic reasons. Ochako let out a sigh and rubbed the back of her head. Well, at least your bodysuit has a practical reason, Keita. I think I should have specified that I didn't want mine this skin tight. But I guess what's done is done. Yeah, I guess. Kyoka shrugged before nudging her head toward the locker room door, where Momo, Tsuyu, Toru and Mina were all headed. Now come on, we'd better get moving. As the students all gathered together to enter the expansive area that was training ground beta, Kyoka immediately spotted Izuku and Tenya without fail. It was kind of hard not to, since the taller boy was dressed up like a suit of armor combined with an engine, while Izuku, well, his costume was a bit more simplistic, but it definitely stood out, as it was mostly a forest green color with white accents. Thank God he took my advice about nixing the seafoam green. Kyoka thought to herself as she continued to look him over. Izuku was still wearing his signature red shoes and had on a pair of heavy white clothes over his hands, along with a red utility belt over his waist. His elbows, knees and shoulders were all donned with heavy black protective pads, and he wore a cowl over his head, one that had a couple interesting details. The most obvious ones were the two long protrusions sticking out of his head, ones that resembled the ears of a rabbit. And the second was a black face guard that had white detailing on the bottom, making it resemble teeth. Kyoka deadpanned at the Green Bean's attempt to homage All Might's signature long bangs and wide smile, the costume's details only slightly resembling them. Izuku, you may look like a dumb rabbit, but at least you tried. She shook that thought out of her head and waved the guys over. Hey, you two, over here. Izuku immediately took notice of her and a smile came to his face, one that could just barely be seen under his mask. Oh, Kyoka, Uraraka, Kiryu. There you guys are. I must say, your costumes are all fantastic. Tenya complimented, his voice echoing inside his helmet. Thanks, Iida, you too. Ochako said before smiling over to Izuku. And Midoriya, your costume is super cute. Keita gave a small chortle and added, hee, yeah, though I'm not sure what the ears are for. A disappointed expression came to Izuku's face and he let out a sigh, with Kyoka giving him a supportive pat on the shoulder. Pine Tree, I don't wanna say I told ya so, but yeah, I guess you told me so. Izuku admitted before explaining. They're supposed to resemble All Might's bangs. Ochako's eyes widened. Ooh, so that's why you have teeth on your mask. Izuku let out a groan and facepalmed, making Ochako panic at what she said. Oh, and not that that's a bad design choice, Midoriya. Lots of heroes homage other heroes with their costumes. Izuku's hand went to his neck. Why yeah, but I kinda wish my vision for a mask came out a bit better. He glanced down to his costume and shrugged. But I will admit, the color choice is actually a lot better than the one I initially wanted. He smiled back over to Kyoka. I have you to thank for that. And I have you to thank for these. Kyoka reached up and touched her headphones with one hand before reaching over and placing her other on one of her wrist-mounted speakers. I'm sure that I'll get a lot of mileage out of these babies. Ah, so you two helped each other with your costumes, then? Tenya guessed as his arms moved in their usual stiff manner. Excellent. As students in the same class, we must always be willing to help one another in certain areas. And I suppose it also helps that you two are such good friends already. Keita smirked and gave a thumbs up. No doubt about that. Now come on, we're lagging behind. The group continued onward and made it out of the large tunnel, leading out into the huge cityscape that was training ground beta. There, All Might was standing tall and proud in his Silver Age costume, smiling at all of the teens making their way out. They say that clothes make the pros, young ladies and gentlemen. And behold, you are the proof. Take this to heart, from here on you are all heroes in training. However, it was at that moment where All Might noticed Izuku's costume, and he had to do a double take to make sure he wasn't seeing things. The fake bangs, the teeth on the mask, it was all too much. All Might put a hand on his mouth and murmured under his breath, "You're so obvious." Kyoka smirked and nudged Izuku. Well, at least you got him to notice. Once again, Izuku facepalmed and groaned. All Might cleared his throat and addressed his class once again. Ahem, so, now that you're ready, it's time to begin combat training. Sir. Tenya raised his hand. This was the same training ground from our entrance exam. Does that mean we'll be conducting urban battles again? Not quite. All Might held up 2 fingers. I'm going to be moving you up a couple steps. Now, as you know, all of the more notable battles that you see between heroes and villains happen outside. But, statistically speaking, run-ins with the dastardliest evildoers happen indoors. Backroom deals, home invasions, secret underground lairs, etc. So, for this exercise, I'll be splitting you into teams of good guys and bad guys to fight 2-on-2 indoor battles. Off to the side, Suyu Asui put a finger to her chin and asked, "Isn't this a little advanced?" All Might clenched a fist. "The best kind of training is what you learn on the battlefield." He then raised a single finger. "But remember, you won't be battling robots here. Now, you'll be dealing with actual people." At that moment, Momo Yaoyorozu spoke up. "Sir, will you be the one deciding who wins? How much can we hurt the other team?" Katsuki piped up, the ashen blonde wearing a mask that appeared like it was exploding off his face while his arms were donned with a pair of gauntlets that were shaped like grenades. Ochako tapped her fingers together. "Do we have to worry about the losers being expelled? Will you be pairing us up based on chance or competitive skill?" Tenya jumped in. Finally, the last question came from the rather flamboyant blonde dressed in shiny armor and donned in a sparkly cape. "Isn't this cape très chic?" Once again, All Might clenched a fist, this time in frustration. "I wasn't finished talking," he muttered to himself before taking a small pamphlet out of his pocket. "Alright, here's the scenario for this exercise. The villains have hidden a missile somewhere in the hideout. It's the hero's goal to foil their plans by either capturing the villains or retrieving the weapon. If the villains are able to catch the good guys or protect their payload, then they will likewise emerge as the victors." He put his pamphlet away and pulled out a yellow box out of seemingly nowhere, which was labeled, "Lots." "Time is limited, so we will decide the teams by drawing lots." This raised Tenya's concerns. "Isn't there a better way? Think about it, pros often have to team up with other heroes on the spot." Izuku rationalized. "So maybe that's the reason why he chose this method. I see, life is a random series of events, after all." Tenya concurred before bowing to All Might. "Please, excuse my rudeness." "No sweat." All Might brushed off before pumping a fist into the air. "Let's draw." Everyone drew their lots and, much to Kyoka's disappointment, she and Izuku didn't have matching team letters. "Gah, damn it, I'm Team G," the punk rocker said in disappointment. "A, and it seems like I'm Team A." Izuku spoke up next. Ochako suddenly gasped and showed him her lot, which coincidentally had the letter A on it. "No way. Midoriya, we're a team." "Oh, that's great, Uraraka." Izuku smiled, though he was slightly taken aback by her enthusiasm. I look forward to working with you in this exercise." Izuku then glanced over and saw that Tenya and Bakugo had grouped up, both of them having been assigned to Team D. "Oh geez, Iida might want to brace himself." His gaze then trailed over to Keita, who was still searching for her partner. Hey, Keita, what team are you on?" Keita furrowed her brows a bit as her eyes went down to her lot. "Well, I'm on Team C, but I can't seem to find." "Oh, you're on Team C, Kiryu." Keita perked her head up to see none other than Momo Yaoyorozu step up to the group, a slip in her hand that had the letter C on it. Momo gave the Soro Parts user a smile and bowed politely to her. "I must say, I'm happy to be paired up with you." "I'm Momo Yaoyorozu, it's a pleasure." Izuku let out a yelp and immediately directed his gaze away from the raven-haired beauty, not prepared for the girl's rather shocking costume choice. Kyoka couldn't help but smile at that. "Hey, well, he's certainly polite, I'll give him that." Keita smiled to her partner and offered a handshake, which Momo reciprocated. "Ah, yeah, I heard of you. You're one of the students who got in on recommendations, right? I hear your quirk is pretty cool." She sent Momo a wink and a toothy grin. "I can't wait to work together on this one, Yaomomo." Momo blinked a bit before repeating, "Yaomomo." "Yeah, I just took your first and last names and combined them for a nickname." Keita explained. "Hope you don't mind." Oh, no, it's fine, really." Momo assured. "I've just never had a nickname before." Keita gave her a thumbs up. "Then it pleases me to be the first to give ya one." Kyoka sighed and glanced back down to her lot, wondering just who was in Team G. I hope it's just not someone who's an utter dope or something." At that moment, she heard someone clear their throat next to her, making her crane her head up. Her eyes widened a bit as the blond boy with the black lightning bolt in his hair was standing next to her, holding up a lot that had the letter G on it. He also had the dopiest grin possible, which only made Kyoka's gut sink. Hey there, name's Denki Kaminari. Not to brag or nothing, but lemme just say, getting me as a partner is a pretty big stroke of luck. Denki began to summon small bolts of electricity in his hands. You can count on me to shock the competition. So what'd you say to that, partner? I say the universe hates me. Kyoka thought with a deadpan expression. Just then, All Might piped up again, the pro hero having retrieved 2 tall boxes, one black and one white. I declare the first teams to fight will be. He reached into the boxes through round holes in the tops of them, pulling out one ball from each of them. These guys. As it happened, the balls had the letters A and D imprinted on them, meaning that Izuku, Ochako, Tenya and Katsuki were up first. And immediately, Kyoka saw the explosive blonde was already glaring daggers at Izuku. Never mind, the universe apparently hates Izuku more. She eyed her partner again and cringed. I really wish I could at least switch onto Ida's team. Team A will be the heroes, and Team D will be the villains. All Might declared before raising his hand to the class. Everyone else, head to the monitoring room. But just so you all know, one of my interns from my hero agency is already in there waiting. He has accompanied me here today in order to merely observe our exercises, so don't worry. Kyoka and Izuku's eyes both widened at that as the class walked toward the monitoring room, both of them realizing immediately who the intern was. He didn't. Both teens thought to themselves. Whoa, Brian, I didn't know you were interning at All Might's hero agency. Keita exclaimed the moment she saw the blonde holoform in the room. Kyoka facepalmed as B gave the Soro parts user a sheepish smile. He did. Oh god, he did. Keita went over and nudged Kyoka's elbow with her own. Hey, Jiro, why didn't you and Midoriya tell us this before? The earphone jack user sighed and her shoulders slumped over, seeing B give her an apologetic face. It didn't take her very long to come up with a viable excuse, though. 'Cause we didn't want you guys to freak out over it. When people hear that Brian is an intern at All Might's agency while also being friends with me and Midoriya, they think we have some special connections to All Might and his agency, which we don't. Kyoka wrapped her finger around one of her jacks and twirled it around. It's really all just a big coincidence. Hell, Brian only just personally introduced us to All Might yesterday. So that's why you guys seemed a lot calmer than us when All Might came into class earlier. Keita nodded before turning and raising a fist to B. I get ya. Still, ya gotta admit, it's pretty cool. Bumblebee returned the fist bump before going over to Kyoka, giving her an apologetic bow. Hey, it's fine, Brian. Trust me, Alright, people, let's get this show on the road. The whole class stopped talking amongst themselves and turned their attention to All Might, the pro standing in the doorway of the room. Teams A and D should be set now, so let's. All Might paused and noticed that Kyoka had her hand raised, and had a serious expression on her face while Brian stood awkwardly next to her. All Might, sir, before we get started, could I ask a small question? Nothing big, really. A sheepish expression came to All Might's face. Oh no. The number 1 hero cleared his throat and granted her request. Of course, young Jiro. What is it that you would like to ask? Kyoka approached All Might and raised a single eyebrow, nudging her head back toward B. Okay, why is B here? She whispered under her breath. And where's his actual body? Like I said, he's simply here to observe. All Might answered with a whisper. I noticed that he's been a bit lost since he drew that picture, so I thought that watching the class train would help him clear his mind a bit. Besides, you gotta figure that he must be lonely out in that parking lot all day. He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. As for where his real body is, it's outside in a rather secluded spot. You'd be surprised how far his holoform can travel from his body. Kyoka sighed once again and glanced back over to B, who was nodding along as Keita talked to him. Alright, I guess it's alright. She furrowed her brows a bit. But now we'll have to be a bit more on our toes since now Keita, and inevitably Iida, Uraraka, along with probably Bakugo will all know about our connection. Won't lie, that last one kinda worries me. I see. All Might nodded before bowing his head a bit. I apologize, young Jiro. If I had known, then I probably wouldn't have. It's fine, we'll deal with it when we come to it. Kyoka nudged her head again. But for right now, you've got a class to teach. She stepped away from All Might and put on a smile. Thanks for answering my question, All Might, sir. All Might's eyes widened when everyone's eyes were back on him again. Oh, of course. Always happy to assist my students. Now, the pro hero stepped up to the control panel on the other side of the room, with multiple screens turning on showing the inside and outside of the building that Teams A and D were stationed. All Might picked up a nearby mic and spoke into it. Let the indoor combat training begin. Team A and Team D, your time starts now. Kyoka's eyes went to the screen, seeing Izuku and Ochako make their way through a window. Good luck, guys, she set her gaze over to another screen, where Iida was standing alone in a room by himself with a large missile. And Iida, sorry you got a shitty partner. Kyoka then saw B step up, the blonde holoform's eyes glued to the massive monitors as well in concern. On one of the screens, he saw Katsuki stalking the halls with a rather malicious expression, and Kyoka knew exactly what he was thinking about. It's okay, B, she whispered faintly. Izuku's gonna be fine, you'll see. Bumblebee sent her a small smile, though she could tell that the disguised robot was still quite worried. Pay attention, students, and think of what you would do in this situation. All Might said as he put a small device in his ear. His eyes also went to the screen as he thought to himself, young Midoriya, in this class, you're just another student. I'll grade you as I would anyone else, without playing favorites. On the main screen, everyone saw Izuku and Ochako enter the building through a window before the duo began wandering the halls, searching for the room where the weapon was. But it wasn't long before the two were found, with Katsuki suddenly springing up from behind a corner and blasting an explosion their way. Izuku took the brunt of it while also tackling Ochako to the ground, losing half of his mask in the process. Holy crap, Keita exclaimed. That jerk almost got the jump on Midoriya. Toward the front of the group, a certain teenage boy with spiky red hair and sharp teeth punched the palm of his hand, giving a glare up to the screen. A sneak attack Bakugo. Come on, what kinda man pulls cheap crap like that? It's a viable strategy, young Kirishima. All Might countered. He's playing the part, acting like a true villain would. The pink girl, Mina, pumped her fists in excitement. Yeah, but it didn't work. Midoriya dodged it. Hey, there he goes. Denki exclaimed, bringing everyone's attention back to the screen. There, they watched as Katsuki went for a right hook to Izuku, only for the green-haired teen to catch it and then twist his body around, tossing Katsuki right up and over his shoulder. Kyoka's eyes widened and a smile came to her face as she watched Izuku slam Katsuki onto the floor back first so hard that it made the ashen blonde bounce back up, eliciting gasps from the entire room. Kyoka, however, had a different reaction. Haha, alright, show that asshat who's boss. But the moment she did that, she saw that nearly every student turned toward her in shock. Even B and Keita were looking at her, and they both had smirks on their faces. The purplet blushed and cleared her throat. Ahem, sorry. Well, actually, I gotta agree. Kirishima spoke up with a grin of his own. That was pretty awesome. The whole class murmured in agreement before going back to the screen, though Keita and B were still grinning at Kyoka. Alright, you're definitely Midoriya's #1 fan in here. Keita teased with a wink. You sure you two don't have more going on? Kyoka's blush intensified, her jacks going haywire in the process. What? No, she insisted, grabbing her jacks to settle them down. Izuku and I are just really good friends, and that's it. Keita crossed her arms and rolled her eyes, going back up to the screen. Sure, Jiro. The punk rocker let out a groan and hid her face in her hands. Yep, the universe hates me. Back on the screen, Katsuki had gotten up and was getting ready to do battle again, though at the moment, he was saying something that was inaudible to the rest of the class, his finger pressed onto something in his ear. Hey, why can't we hear any of this? Kirishima asked. And who's Bakugo talking to? Can't we get some audio with this? All Might then put a finger to his own ear. He has a small radio communicator in his ear so that he can talk to his partners. I gave them out to both teams before the match started. Along with these, the pro pulled out a roll of white tape from his pocket. A roll of capture tape. Wrapping this around your opponent means that you've caught them and they're out of the game. Mina put a finger to her chin. So there's a 15-minute time limit and the good guys have no idea where the weapon is hidden, she sent a confused gaze to All Might. Doesn't that mean that the heroes are at a big disadvantage here? Indeed. All Might confirmed. Real pros have to outwit villains on a daily basis. That's just life. Even when the odds aren't in our favor, we fight. As he listened to All Might explaining the exercise, Bumblebee couldn't help but be utterly intrigued by what the man was teaching. So this is what it's like to be a hero, huh? The disguised robot thought to himself. Man, I wonder if there are any heroes wherever I came from. Monsieur, the sparkly blonde spoke up. He is on the move. Everyone's eyes went back to the screens as Katsuki blasted forward and sent a really powerful kick at Izuku's head, the green-haired boy managing to block it with his arm. It was then that, with an incredibly fluid motion, Izuku began wrapping the capture tape around Katsuki's leg. However, Katsuki quickly went for an explosive punch, which forced Izuku to roll away. "Whoa, little guy's really good," said the muscular, big-lipped student. The student with the rounded elbows then piped up as well. He's holding his own and he hasn't even used his quirk yet. Kyoka couldn't help but smirk to herself, thinking back to how Izuku always studied and took notes in his hero notebooks. Hey, that fanboy knowledge is starting to pay off for him. Next to her, Kata tilted her head. Huh, what you mean? You'll see. Kyoka winked. Before long, Izuku and Ochako split up, the former luring Katsuki away while the zero-gravity girl ran off to find the weapon. Much to Katsuki's chagrin, though, Izuku managed to get away and hide, which only made the explosive blonde shout in anger. That's it, Cabbage Patch, take your time. Over on another screen, the class saw Ochako arrive at the room where Iida was guarding the weapon, and it was at that moment where Iida began to act very strange, causing Ochako to lose it and reveal herself. Kyoka furrowed her brows a bit. What? Young Iida was doing a villainous monologue, trying to get into character. All Might explained. Unfortunately, it seems that young Uraraka found it quite funny and caused her cover to be blown. Kata let out a sigh, but smiled nonetheless. Come on, Chako, ya gotta get your head in the game. Back over the other screen with Izuku, the green-haired boy stood up and readied his capture tape again, preparing to go find Katsuki. Unfortunately, the ashen blonde found him first. One of Katsuki's gauntlets lit up and he raised it up, aiming the barrel on its safety handle directly at Izuku while pulling it back, revealing a pin. Kata's eyes widened in shock. Oh shit. All Might, sir, he's going too far. He's gonna blast Izuku. Kyoka shouted as Bumblebee's eyes widened in terror. Young Bakugo. All Might shouted into his mic. Don't do it. You'll kill him. The response he got in his earpiece was quite gut-dropping. He'll be fine as long as he dodges. With that, Katsuki pulled the pin and unleashed an enormous blast, one that engulfed the entire hallway and even took out the camera. The explosion was so powerful that the monitoring room shook violently, taking the students aback. No! Kyoka shouted, while Bumblebee looked like he was about to faint. Izuku! Come in! All Might called into his mic. Come in, Midoriya. Thankfully, he got a response. I'm okay, I think. Up on the screen, another camera managed to find Izuku, the young man's right sleeve having been torn off in the explosion along with the remainder of his mask. However, Bakugo was also approaching from the smoke, his other gauntlet lighting up. Kyoka grit her teeth and clenched her fists. If he does that shit again, I will be hurting him. Hey, there goes Ochako. Kyoka's eyes darted over to the other screen at Tsuyu's words, seeing the zero-gravity girl making a mad dash for the weapon. Iida went to stop her, but Ochako used her quirk on herself in order to float over the engine quirk user, taking him by surprise. Just as quick as that happened, though, Iida used his quirk to run right over to the weapon and pull it out of reach just as Ochako stopped using her powers, resulting in her taking a tumble and crashing into the wall. Kata winced at the hard impact. Ooh, that wasn't pretty. No kidding. Denki agreed. But that's nothing compared to what Midoriya's dealing with. Bakugo's pretty scary. Kyoka sent an apprehensive look up to the screen, seeing that Katsuki was quickly growing irritated at Izuku ignoring him in favor of contacting Ochako. Sure enough, the explosive blonde was getting ready to let loose another blast. "All Might, sir, this is getting out of hand," Kyoka pleaded with the pro. "Bakugo's gone crazy." "She's right," Kirishima agreed. "At this rate, he'll kill Midoriya." "Not so," All Might denied. "Believe it or not, he isn't trying to kill Midoriya, merely trying to goad him into fighting him with his quirk." But still, All Might spoke loud and clearly into his mic, "Young Bakugo. Pull that pin and I'll disqualify you and your partner from this exercise." He received an indignant, "What?" from Bakugo before explaining, "You're destroying the stronghold that you're trying to protect with such strong attacks. A poor strategy whether you're a hero or villain. As I said, the penalty will result in disqualification, and Team A will be handed the win." The group saw Bakugo's face snarl in frustration before he let out a loud scream, which some could even hear all the way from All Might's earpiece. "Fine. We'll fight hand to hand." Katsuki blasted himself forward and Izuku readied himself to throw a punch, only for the ashen blonde to use his quirk again to blast himself up and over Izuku, landing a powerful blast onto the green-haired boy's back. Everyone let out a gasp, and Keita grit her teeth. "Okay, the hell was that move?" At the back of the class, another student spoke up, the one with the half and half white and red hair. The left side of his body was covered entirely in ice, and a glowing red light shined from his eye. "He doesn't come off as a guy with a strategy, but he's actually quite smart," he said calmly, getting everyone's attention. "He changed his trajectory by using that blast in midair, which also doubled as a smokescreen." Back up front, Momo nodded at that. "Yes, very clever. A feint attack like that requires an extreme and impressive amount of precision." Denki let out a saddened sigh. Bakugo's uber talented. I hate it." Kyoka deadpanned at her partner's demeanor, but couldn't help but agree with him. Preaching to the choir there, Blondie. Her eyes then turned to Bumblebee, whose gaze seemed glued to the monitors. However, the blonde holoform didn't seem to be scared, more like mesmerized by what was going on. "A, are you alright?" All at once, Bakugo went back on the attack, sending a right hook at Izuku's arm from behind before grabbing it, the explosive blonde using his free hand to create a bunch of smaller explosions. This created enough momentum for him to toss Izuku quite hard, sending the quirk inheritor into the floor, which cracked beneath him. Kyoka let out a gasp and went up to All Might again. "Sir, please, this is hard to watch." "She's right," Mina said worriedly. "All Bakugo has to do is wrap tape around Midoriya, not kill him." All Might's hand shook slightly at their words. He knew they were right, but still, as he watched his young pupil get up even after all of that punishment, unwilling to give up in the face of adversity, he knew he couldn't rob Izuku of this experience. For his sake, I'll let him keep going, at least for now. However, at that point, Izuku began to perform a tactical retreat, though the other students didn't see it that way. "He's running away," Mina said. "Well, what other choice does he have?" Keita said worriedly. "Unless he has a plan, this might be it." At that moment, Izuku approached the window and stood firm, the green-haired young man pulling up his battle mask over his face as he glared at Katsuki. Inside of his earpiece, All Might could hear the ashen blonde speak to Izuku, "Why won't you use your damn quirk, Deku? Have you been underestimating me all this time, you bastard? Even since we were kids?" Immediately, Izuku responded, and All Might could hear the conviction in his pupil's voice. "You idiot. That's not it at all. Kachan, I know that you're stronger and better than me." He screamed directly at Katsuki with all the force he could muster, "And I want to win and surpass you because of that." All Might gazed up at the screen just as Izuku and Bakugo leapt at each other, each drawing their fists back. The only time I ever heard such conviction in his voice is when he said he wanted to be a hero, he thought to himself as he saw Izuku begin to channel One for All into his right arm. "Young Midoriya, if you wish to make that a reality, then he has to do this. Not for me, but for himself." However, not everyone saw it that way. "Oh, for fuck's sake," Kyoka exclaimed as she reached up and pulled the mic down to her level. Wait, what? Izuku, you stupid celery stick, stop this or I'm gonna." Just then, she heard something from All Might's earpiece. "Uraraka, now." Kyoka's eyes darted back up to the screens to see Ochako grabbing onto one of the pillars on the floor above, and a second later, Izuku shouted. Detroit, SMAAAAASH. Instead of hitting Katsuki, Izuku performed an uppercut with his quirk, which resulted in a huge vortex of wind being kicked up and sent blasting upward, blowing a massive hole through the building. Once again, the monitoring room shook at the amount of sheer power being used. Inside of the room where the missile was, everyone watched as Ochako used her quirk on the pillar so she could lift it, and then swing it at the flying debris to send it right to Iida. This distracted the engine quirk user long enough for Uraraka to use her quirk on herself and float right over his head, allowing her to land right on the missile and hold onto it for dear life. Everyone was left stunned as the smoke cleared on the lower floor, revealing Katsuki to be completely fine. But the same couldn't be said for Izuku, his right arm completely broken while his left arm was badly burned. After a few seconds with both opponents standing there, All Might brought the mic back up to his face. You did it, the whole room watched as Izuku fell to the ground, his face mask falling off as he did. The hero team, WIINS. Back on the other screen, the students watched as Ochako slowly slipped off the missile and onto the ground, with Iida supporting her as she resisted puking her guts out. Are you sure we can count this as a win? Keita asked. Yeah, I mean, the losers look barely touched. Denki pointed out, while the winners are both on the ground. Toward the back of the room, the young, bird-headed student closed his eyes and mused, how does the old saying go? They lost the battle, but won the war. This class is intense, Suyu uttered. Indeed. All Might agreed. Admittedly, I didn't think it would go this far. He glanced down to see Kyoka, and she was not giving him a happy face. I can explain, he muttered. I'd rather you not and just go make sure Izuku's alright. Kyoka whispered, resisting the urge to snap at the pro. We'll talk about it later. Besides, her eyes shifted over to Bumblebee, the blonde holoform still staring off into space. I think we're going to be having multiple problems right now. Ahem, why yes, quite. All Might nodded. I'll go and check up on the teams. Everyone, stay here until I return. Kyoka watched as All Might left, never letting up on her glare. She could never bring herself to hate All Might, that was certain, but she was definitely not happy that he let that match go on for as long as he did. Then again, you didn't have to grab the mic and yell into it, Kyoka, she chastised herself. Where the heck did that come from? Were you really that worried for Izuku? Scratch that, yes, I was. Kyoka sighed before going over to check on Bumblebee, the blonde holoform still lost in a trance. B, you okay? Please tell me you're at least having a good memory. Indeed, Bumblebee was recalling a certain memory, though whether it was a good or bad one was up to interpretation. On the one hand, seeing Bakugo's unrelenting attacks, red-eyed glare and huge blasts of explosive power was bringing to mind an individual that would give B goosebumps if he was able to. But on the other hand, seeing Izuku valiantly continue to fight in the face of danger, going forward through his sheer force of will and determination, and topping it all off with him putting his face mask on during the final confrontation, it made him remember someone that gave him a good feeling in his inner workings. A figure that opposed the malicious force that Bakugo reminded him of, and he could hear both of these people inside of his head. One shall stand, one shall fall. Prime, why throw away your life so recklessly? That's a question you should ask yourself, Megatron. No, I'll crush you with my bare hands. Hey. Kyoka jabbed one of her jacks into B's shoulder, making him snap out of his memory replay while also making him convulse erratically. Brian, snap out of it. Once, Brian was able to recollect himself, he rounded about on Kyoka in surprise. Dude, you were zonked out of your head for like 5 minutes. B's eyes widened before a thoughtful expression came to his face, pointing to his head for emphasis. Yeah, I kinda figured that it was a memory. Was it another good one? B made a so movement with his hands. I see. Well, at least you got something, which is kinda good news. Also, in case ya missed it, Izuku won. Yeah, but he broke his arm and got third-degree burns in the process. Keita added, stepping over to the duo. I hope he'll be alright. Momo stepped up to the group as well. I can certainly say one thing, I doubt that the rest of the exercises will be as dynamic as theirs was. Kyoka let out a sigh. Yeah, no kidding. Her eyes went back up to the screen, just in time to see Izuku be taken away on a stretcher to the nurse's office. All I know is, that he's in for such an earful. Izuku felt his eyes flutter open, the first thing he saw being the bright fluorescent lights above his head. MHA. But then, the pain hit him immediately, and it was then that he noticed that he had one arm in a cast and a sling, while the other was simply bandaged up. He also noticed that he was in a bed, which could only mean one thing: I'm in the nurse's office, again. He found the clock, seeing that it was almost 4. It's mid-afternoon. All of a sudden, a certain little old lady with a siren in her hair entered his peripheral vision. "Rise and shine, Sonny," Recovery Girl cheerfully said, causing Izuku to sit directly up in shock. What happened?" the green-haired boy asked. "Well, you managed to win All Might's training exercise, at the cost of you breaking your arm and getting multiple burns." Recovery Girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a few gummies, handing them over to Izuku. "Your injuries should heal overnight, so don't worry. But come back tomorrow for a quick checkup, alright, sweetie?" Yeah, sure," Izuku said before standing up and bowing to the nurse. Thank you again, Recovery Girl. Of course, just try not to make these visits regular, okay, dear?" the elderly heroine requested. "Like I said, my quirk could have negative side effects if used too much on one person too frequently." Izuku nodded at that before going to the door. "Alright, and thanks again." The young quirk inheritor walked down the hall with his head low, a disappointed look coming to his face as he remembered what had happened during the training exercise, as well as the fact he missed all of his afternoon classes. "Mr. Aizawa's probably gonna choke me with his scarf." He made it back to 1A's door and opened it slowly, resigning himself to his fate. But what he was met with was far from what he was expecting. "Hey, guys, Midoriya's back." Izuku's eyes shot up just in time to see the red-headed, sharp-toothed boy come strolling up to him, along with the large guy with the big lips, the boy with the rounded elbows and triangular-shaped grin, and the pink girl with the horns on her head, all 4 of them beaming right at Izuku. "Good to see ya up on your feet, dude." The redhead crossed his arms and let out a laugh. "Hey, I don't know what you were saying during that match, but you were pretty fired up, no doubt about it. I can't believe you held your own against Bakugo." The boy with the rounded elbows added. "He's super strong." The pink girl pumped her arms in excitement. "You were really good at dodging." Finally, the big guy spoke up. "After seeing how you did in your match, we made sure not to hold back during ours, so thanks for the motivation." "Did I mention that your dodging was like, whoa?" the pink girl said again, bouncing up and down excitedly. Izuku was taken utterly aback by all of the attention he was getting. This was definitely something he wasn't used to, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel happy at hearing their praise. Is this really what it's like not to be an outcast?" he thought to himself. The redhead jerked a thumb to himself. "Hey, I'm Eijiro Kirishima. We've been going over training results while you were recovering." The boy with the round elbows introduced himself next. "Hi, I'm Hantasiro. And I'm Mina Ishido." The pink girl jumped in, her arms flailing wildly about. "And I just wanna say that your dodging was super awesome." At that moment, a certain green-haired girl with large eyes peeked out from behind Mina and introduced herself as well. "Suyu Asui. But please, call me Sue." Finally, the big guy jerked a thumb to his face. "And I'm Rikido Sato. Nice to meet ya." "And nice to meet all of you, T2. Izuku returned. I'm just surprised that you guys are." "Izuku Midoriya." The green-haired boy was cut off and his blood ran cold, hearing the voice that he had gotten so familiar with over the past few weeks call out his full name, and she didn't sound happy. "Uh-oh," Eijiro muttered, peering over his shoulder to see Kyoka coming over to them, the perplet flanked on either side by a rather worried Keita and Momo. "Why, she's been fuming for the whole afternoon." He glanced back over to Midoriya and muttered, "Good luck, bro." Wait, what's that supposed to, eow? Izuku let out a yell as Kyoka jabbed her jacks into Izuku's arms, sending a paralyzing feeling directly into him. He didn't have long to recover before Kyoka then wrapped her jacks around his neck and pulled him down so that he was eye level with her, her glare piercing directly into his soul. Hey, Kyoka. How was the? Do not change the subject, Izuku. Kyoka stated firmly, making the boy flinch. What the hell were you thinking? I'll admit, seeing you hand Bakugo his ass at first was entertaining to watch, but after that first explosion, you really should have made a retreat. Izuku gulped and uttered, I. Kyoka furrowed her brow a bit. Izuku, Bakugo was taking things way too far and you actually decided to try and fight him like that. Do you know how terrified I was when I saw you two on a collision course while you were getting ready for a full power punch? She then pointed to his cast. Which, by the way, wasn't really the smartest move. But I think you figured that out already. Well, the punch wasn't made for him, exactly. Izuku saw Kyoka's eyes narrow even further and he let out a sigh, hanging his head. Why, you're right, Kyoka. It wasn't a smart choice. I let my emotions get the better of me back there, and I went for an attack when I really shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Kyoka let out a sigh of her own before pulling her jacks back, allowing Izuku to stand up. Well, I'm glad you realize that. She gave him a serious look and pointed a finger at him. Just make sure you don't do that again, got it? I don't want you leaving this school every day with an injury. Why yeah, of course. Izuku agreed. Behind Kyoka, Keita leaned over to Momo and whispered, see, what did I tell ya? Aren't they cute or what? Momo gave a nod. Indeed, it's quite sweet. She raised an eyebrow to Keita. Are they actually together, though? Keita shook her head. Nope, but honestly, I don't think it'll be low. Whoa. The Soro Parts user let out a gasp as she suddenly found an earphone jack pointing straight at her face, a rather flustered Kyoka staring directly at her. How did you? My hearing is off the scale, remember? Kyoka countered. I thought you kept that in mind after our combat exercise. She stepped up and pursed her lips at the taller girl. Keita, you're my friend, but I'd appreciate it if you not talk about stuff like that. Please. A hand went to her arm as her expression became sheepish. Because to be honest, I'm kinda trying to sort this out on my own. The gray-skinned girl sent Kyoka an apologetic face, bowing her head as she did. I completely understand. Sorry about that, Kyo. No prob. Kyoka smiled. Also, first Yaomomo and now Kyo. Do you give everyone nicknames? Keita shrugged. Only when I see an opportunity. At that moment, the other door to the classroom opened up and Denki and Ochako came walking in, the duo carrying large stacks of books. Keita raised an arm and called out, Yo, Chako. Ochako brightened up at the sight of her friend and answered. Hi, Keita, I was just about to, oh. At that moment, Ochako caught sight of her battle partner, as well as the fact that he was still entirely bandaged up. Midoriya, you're back, but why didn't recovery girl heal your injuries? Well, it all has to do with how much stamina I'm using. Izuku explained. Without it, her quirk could have bad side effects. Oh, I see. Ochako nodded. By the way, did you see Bakugo on your way here? Izuku blinked at that, and Kyoka was immediately on high altered. And no, why do you ask? Well, ever since your match ended, he seemed kinda, out of it, ya know. Ochako set the books down on the front desk as she explained. Even during the other matches, he seemed, spaced out. I don't know what happened during your fight down below Iida and I, but whatever did happen, it must have been pretty intense for it to have that kind of effect on him. A determined yet worried expression came to Izuku's face. I see. He then started to make his way toward the door. Excuse me, I need to go. Hold on there, Jethro. Kyoka said, wrapping one of her jacks around Izuku's waist to stop him mid-stride. Just where do you think you're going? Izuku winced and turned toward her nervously. Well, I was. Izuku, you know what'll happen if you lie to me. Kyoka said bluntly. Without missing a beat, Izuku confessed. I was going to go find Kachan. He watched as Kyoka frowned in disapproval. I'm guessing you don't want me to go find him. Duh. Kyoka answered. Izuku, it's like I said before. The relationship you have with Bakugo is unhealthy at best and downright abusive at worst. You can't keep throwing yourself at him and hoping that he'll listen to what you have to say. She took a deep breath and stated plain and simple, Izuku, I wasn't able to stop Bakugo from trying to throttle you yesterday, so I'm going to start making up for that right now. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that you need to take a step back from Bakugo. Trust me, you'll feel better if you do. Izuku locked eyes with Kyoka for a good 20 seconds, knowing that he wasn't going to be winning this argument. He sighed once more and nodded. Why yeah, you're right, Kyoka. Maybe I do need to take a step back from Kachan, though that's gonna be a bit hard considering I'm sitting right behind him. Kyoka grinned at that. Well, it's a good thing that I actually thought of that. She pointed over to Izuku's seat, and there was someone else in it. You see, I actually convinced Mr. Aizawa to switch up the seating arrangement a little bit. Izuku, meet Mezzo Shoji. The incredibly tall, masked teenager with 6 tentacle-like arms stood up from Izuku's desk, gazing down toward the two as Kyoka continued. He agreed to switch seats with you so that we'd be in the same row. Izuku couldn't help but feel a little intimidated by the large teen, but he extended a hand anyway. Hi. Hello, Midoriya. Mezzo greeted back, accepting the handshake. It's nice to make your acquaintance. And nice job during the training exercise, by the way. But more to the point, I'm not completely sure about what's going on between you and Bakugo, but from what I've witnessed so far, I can only infer that it isn't exactly positive. He waved a hand over to his former desk, which was conveniently in front of Kyoka's. Thankfully, Mr. Aizawa didn't argue much when it came to seating arrangements, so my desk is now yours. Oh, thank you. Izuku bowed. Why you're very kind, Shoji. Don't mention it, Mezzo said before the final bell rang, giving everyone the signal to grab their stuff and leave. Well, there's the last bell. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Izuku nodded back and smiled. Why yeah, and thanks again. With that, Izuku and Kyoka took their leave, with Izuku having his backpack slung awkwardly over one shoulder. So, Kyoka, how did your exercise go? Kyoka smirked and let out a snicker. Hey, surprisingly, we won against Momo and Keita. I thought my partner was a bit of a doof, but he actually managed to pull through for us. She gave Izuku a wink. By the way, those hand speakers you suggested were a big help. Thanks, Pine Tree. The quirk inheritor couldn't help but blush slightly. Hey, well, I had a feeling they'd be convenient. However, it was then that Kyoka's face grew serious once again. By the way, All Might brought Bumblebee to watch the combat training. Izuku's eyes nearly bugged out of his head at that, and Kyoka was quick to assure him. Don't worry, nobody saw him in robot mode. If anything, the only thing that really came out of this is that Keita, Ochako, and Tenya were surprised we didn't tell them that Brian was All Might's intern. I see. Izuku nodded. Well, that's good. However, Izuku's eyes widened a little bit again. Wait, did Kachan notice him? Kyoka gave a shrug. Actually, no. He was too spaced out after your big throwdown to notice him. Which is honestly pretty good, because B was glaring at him a lot while he was in the monitoring room with us. Izuku let out a sigh. Well, that's a relief, though I think we might wanna tell B to ease up on the glaring part. Yeah, but speaking of B, Kyoka trailed off as Izuku's head tilted slightly, wondering what was wrong. Ya see, while B was watching your fight, his memory was jogged again. Kyoka nodded as Izuku's jaw fell open. Yeah, that's how I thought you'd react. Chapter 10, Emergency at Lunchtime. Okay, so we all know why we're here, right? Kyoka asked with her arms crossed. After the whole debacle earlier that day at school, she wanted to gather up everyone for an important meeting, but since Hatsume Otto was having a particularly busy afternoon, Izuku had suggested they go to All Might's place for the meeting, even though he was still dreading it. It was there where Kyoka was standing in the middle of All Might's garage, with the aforementioned number 1 hero, along with Izuku, Mei and Bumblebee were all lined up, the yellow mech sitting on the ground in his robot mode. All Might cleared his throat and spoke up. Ahem, unfortunately, yes, I do. Why yeah, so do I. Izuku nodded, rubbing the back of his head. Bumblebee gave a low buzz while moving his hand in a so-so motion, the robot still slightly confused while also having a small idea as to what was going on. However, the odd one out was Mei, who was still confused as to why Kyoka called this meeting. Yeah, I'm kinda lost on this whole thing. She crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow to Kyoka. So, 2 questions, why is Muscles all bandaged up like that, and why am I here instead of back at school where I can start working on my new high-tech babies? Kyoka deadpanned at that and let out a sigh. Well, for one, Bumblebee had another memory, so there's that. Instantly, May's frown turned upside down. And now you have my attention, Jackie. What do we have? Slow your roll there, Hatsume. Kyoka said with a raised hand. There's something that needs to be talked about that's way more important right now. She saw May scrunch her face up in confusion and agitation, making her sigh. Don't worry, we'll get there, I promise. But right now, I need to talk to these two. She jabbed a thumb in All Might in Izuku's direction, the two visibly wincing. It's actually about why Izuku's arms are like that. May glanced down to Izuku's arms, an uneasy expression coming to her face. Well, alright, this does look more important. Kyoka gave May a small smile and bowed her head. Thank you, Hatsume. I promise, we'll get to B's memory in a little bit. Her serious expression returned as she turned around and walked over to the 2-1 for all users, crossing her arms as her eyes went to Izuku first. Izuku, I already gave you some words earlier, so I'll let up on you for now. Her eyes then darted up to All Might, who flinched slightly at her glare. What I wanna know now is why you didn't stop the match before things got out of hand. All Might, you saw what was happening right before your eyes, so why didn't you stop it? Well, All Might's hand went to his neck, the number 1 hero still a little unsure how to answer. You see, young Jiro, when I saw what was happening between young Midoriya and young Bakugo, I was very conflicted on whether I should stop the fight. He took a brief pause as he saw Kyoka's brows furrow and Izuku's rise up in surprise. But, after hearing young Midoriya's conviction, saying that he was determined to beat and surpass young Bakugo, I had a feeling that that was meant to happen. If anything, though, this only made Kyoka all the more confused, and as a result, more unhappy with his answer. She brandished her jacks, pointing them directly at All Might. Choose carefully how you want to explain that. Kyoka. Izuku exclaimed while waving around his one arm that wasn't in a sling around in a panic. What are you doing? Trying to get answers, Izuku. Kyoka answered while not taking her eyes off All Might for a second. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I find that very hard to believe. Izuku countered. You do realize why you're pointing your jacks at, right? However, All Might raised a hand to his pupil. It's alright, young Midoriya, she has every right to be angry with me. His eyes focused down onto Kyoka, giving her a nod. After all, I risked your well-being during that exercise, and as your friend, it's only natural that she'd be worried about you. All Might then bowed his head to Kyoka apologetically. And I must profusely apologize to you as well, young Jiro, for making you worry like that. In truth, I thought that the battle between young Midoriya and young Bakugo was necessary because it would allow Midoriya to become the kind of hero he strives to be. In my experience, rivalries can help young heroes to exceed their own expectations, pushing themselves past the limit and allowing them to reach greater heights that not even they could have expected. Kyoka blinked a couple times before pinching the bridge of her nose, a sigh escaping her lips. So that's what this is about. Probably should have guessed. She placed a hand on her hip as she gazed up to the pro-hero. All Might, what exactly has Izuku told you about Bakugo? In the corner of her eye, she saw Izuku's face grow slightly pale, and that was all the tell she needed. Knew it. Well, he told me that young Bakugo thinks very highly of himself. All Might assessed. And that his quirk was very good. Apparently young Bakugo has been training all his life in order to become a great hero, and young Midoriya often looks to him for inspiration. Yeah, see, there's the problem. Kyoka glanced over to Izuku and gave him a serious face, making the green-haired boy flinch. I think Izuku is leaving a few details out. Like the fact that Bakugo is actually a really big bully who picked on him in middle school for being quirkless. All Might's eyes widened and craned his head to Izuku, his pupil's gaze having lowered to the ground. Young Midoriya, have you not been telling me the whole truth about young Bakugo? Izuku let out a sigh and hung his head, a saddened expression on his face. I'm sorry, All Might, I didn't want to ruin Kachan's chances of getting into UA if anyone found out about the bullying thing. All Might, Kyoka, May and Bumblebee all stared at Izuku in shock, the green-haired boy lifting his head back up to them. Why, you see, even though Kachan is a giant jerk to me, I still think that he's got potential to be a great hero. He might not be doing it for noble reasons, he's obsessed with winning and being the best, but I still think that there is good in him. The quartet of onlookers all stayed silent for a good while before Bumblebee turned on his radio. Well, that's ZRKT, more than I can say, ZRKT, for the rest of us. Yeah, B's got a point, Izuku. Kyoka agreed. I don't know what you see in Bakugo, but if there's any good in him, it's buried pretty deep under all of that narcissism. May placed a hand on her hip. Muscles, I haven't even met the guy, and even I agree that he sounds like a big dummy. I know, but I'm hoping that him being at UA will help him. Izuku emphasized. Help him be a better person. Someone who can really be worthy of being a hero. He gazed up to his mentor, the hero's unrelenting smile still there. I know it's a long shot, All Might, but please, he deserves a chance. All Might placed a hand to his chin and hummed thoughtfully to himself, the man staying silent for a while before putting his hands to his hips. Alright, here's what the deal is going to be, he pointed to Izuku. Young Jiro said that she's already asked someone to switch desks with you, yes? Why yeah, that's right. Izuku nodded. I've switched desks with Shoji and I'm now in front of Kyoka. Good, that means you're now a fair bit away from young Bakugo. All Might nodded. It may not be far, but it's better than being directly behind him. He lowered himself down so that he and his pupil were face to face. Now, you are to stay away from young Bakugo for as long as you can prevent it. Should anything happen again, I will inform Principal Nezu myself and leave it in his hands. Pause, I should say. Bullying is not something that UA tolerates, so be sure to stay out of his hair, and hopefully, he'll remain out of yours. Izuku sighed to himself, seeing this as likely the best option going forward. Why yeah, you're probably right. Thank you, All Might. You're welcome. I hope you were right, though, young Midoriya. All Might lowered his head a bit. Because if young Bakugo cannot make it as a hero, I shudder to think of the kind of villain he could become should he give in to his more violent urges. ZRKT, welcome to my nightmare. Bumblebee blasted out his radio, Alice Cooper's lyrics describing his thoughts on the matter. Kyoka crossed her arms and groaned a little. Yeah, my sentiments exactly, B. She zeroed in on Izuku with a small frown. I hope you know what you're doing with this one, celery stick. I hope so, too. Izuku affirmed. I know it's a long shot, but I really do think that Kachan can be a great hero. The green-haired boy put a hand to the back of his neck. And while he may not be doing it for the right reasons, per se, it's still better than the alternative. There was an eerie silence throughout the room, the very thought of Katsuki being a villain instead of a hero weighing on everybody's minds. But why don't we shift focus now? Izuku shifted his eyes up to Bumblebee expectantly. Bumblebee, you said that you had another memory during class. Bumblebee nodded and, all of a sudden, WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHK. The yellow mech transformed into vehicle mode, his holoform appearing in the front seat. The blonde stepped out of himself, the picture he drew of RC in his hand. He went over to the nearby work desk and flipped the picture over to the blank side, with the four humans peering over his shoulder as he grabbed a nearby pencil. After a few seconds of writing, he held up the paper and showed it to them, piquing everybody's interest. May's brows furrowed curiously as she read the new names. Prime and Megatron. She glanced over to Bumblebee and asked, so, do you have any idea who these bots are, Bumblebee? The blonde holoform nodded, setting the paper down on the desk before disappearing entirely. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHK. Without wasting a second, Bumblebee transformed again and crouched down, pointing to the name, Prime, on the sheet. He then reached down and pressed the red face symbol on his foot, activating the message from the large, red and blue bot again. B127, I pray this message finds you. Bumblebee pointed between the paper and the hologram of the other robot before speaking through his radio. ZRKT, that's him, officer. I see. All Might placed a hand on his chin again, his eyes focused on the holographic message. So, this large bot must be this, Prime, that Bumblebee is remembering. Ooh, this is so great. May said excitedly. We finally have a name for this bot. Kyoka, however, couldn't help but raise a brow. Okay, but what kinda name is Prime, exactly? It doesn't really sound complete, you know. Feels like something's missing from it. Why yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like a whole name. Izuku agreed. Then again, with names like Megatron, RC, and B127, it kinda sounds like the names that these robots have aren't exactly what we could call normal. In fact, I think Prime is probably the most normal name out of all of them. All Might gave a nod. Very true, but all the same, I believe we might be getting closer to the root of Bumblebee's lost memories. They're becoming all the more clearer after all. And that is certainly a good thing. May said with a beaming grin. It means it probably won't be long until we reach a really big breakthrough. Still kinda wish we knew just what kind of things cause these memory triggers, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. May then reached into her back pocket and pulled out something, keeping it hidden in her hand. But all the same, this just gives me all the more reason to set you guys up with these super cute babies. She opened her hand to reveal 4 small, round objects in her hand, each of them with 2 tiny buttons, a red one and a blue one, as well as a small light on them. Surprise! I managed to perfect my tracers today. Hey, that's great, Hatsume. Izuku said before he and Kyoka each took one of their own, the duo looking down at them in curiosity. So, how do they work, exactly? May raised a single finger. Pretty simple, really. Press the button. Izuku did as he was told and pressed the button on his tracker, which made the little red light start blinking. The device began to let out a low beeping noise before all of the other tracers began beeping as well, intercepting the first one's signal. See, this is how we know when someone's in trouble. Okay, cool. Kyoka muttered. So, how do we find them if they are? Then we get to my favorite part of these babies. Press the blue button next. Kyoka did so and, without warning, a small holographic radar popped up from it, making the punk rocker jump in surprise. On the radar screen, 3 small red blips and a single green blip suddenly appeared, blinking in time with the beeping from the devices. See, instant holographic locator. It'll tell you just how far you are from the tracer that sent the signal, as well as the other ones, just in case. All Might let out a laugh, impressed by the small machines. Haha, well done, young Hatsume. I must say, you've really put a lot of thought into these little things. Izuku smiled in agreement. Why yeah, Hatsume, this is really impressive. I'm surprised why you were able to get a hologram projector into one of these things. Ah, it wasn't hard. May waved off before pointing to her eyes. At least, not with a quirk like mine. Working with such tiny circuits is a cinch with my eyes. I can imagine. Kyoka nodded before glancing over to Bumblebee. So, will Bumblebee be getting one of these, too? Oh yeah, he will. May confirmed as she gazed up to be himself. He'll just have to use it while also using his holoform. The yellow mech nodded and transformed back into his beetle form, with Brian reappearing in the front seat once more. May stepped over and handed him a tracer. Okay, now keep this in a place where you won't crush it when you transform, alright? I know you've got a lot of shifting parts, so I hope you know your own body well enough at this point to put this in a safe place. Bumblebee gave a salute and opened up his glove compartment, putting the tracer inside of it. Okay, a bit of an obvious place, but I'll take it. Kyoka and Izuku gave a little laugh at that. Hee, why am I not surprised? She glanced over to Izuku and nudged his shoulder a bit. So, what do you think we'll be in for at school tomorrow, Green Bean? Izuku let out another sigh, his shoulders sagging a little. I don't know. But I think after today, there's not much that can surprise me at this point. Izuku Midoriya was now 1A's class representative. What? Needless to say, the day had started off odd enough with the swarm of reporters outside the school looking for All Might on his day off. But of course, things didn't stop there. As Izuku had expected, Aizawa had admonished him for breaking his arm during the training session yesterday. But thankfully, the tired teacher had let him off with a few words of encouragement. Izuku couldn't exactly tell, but then after that, Aizawa announced that they'd be electing people to be the class rep, and immediately, everyone began throwing their hats into the ring. Thankfully, Iida had gotten control of the situation and suggested they leave it up to a vote. Aizawa didn't argue, so that's what they did, and in the end, a lot of the class had voted for themselves, including Izuku. But surprisingly, 3 other people had voted for him as well, while 2 had voted for Momo, making them the head representative and vice representative respectively. And that's where Izuku found himself now, staring at his lunch plate in the cafeteria surrounded by his friends, unsure of what to make of all this. Guys, I won't lie, I'm kinda worried about the whole class representative thing. He shifted his eyes up to Kyoka, Ochako, Keita and Tenya, who were all eating their own lunches. I'm just not sure if I'm qualified. Kyoka swallowed the rice she was eating and gave Izuku a reassuring smile. Ah, come on Green Bean, you're more than qualified. She gave him a wink. After all, why do you think I voted for ya? Wait, you did? Yeah, same here. Ochako smiled. With your knowledge and how you performed yesterday during our combat exercise, why wouldn't you be a good pick? Tenya nodded affirmatively. You'll be great, Midoriya. Your courage and quick thinking under stress, as well as the strength you demonstrated, will make you a worthy leader. He went back to his rice, but not before adding, those are the reasons why I voted for you at least. Izuku was left shocked. He was sitting with the 3 people that had given him their votes. Wow, these guys really are my friends. A small smile came to his face at that thought, though his nerves weren't exactly all that calm yet. Well, I appreciate your guys' honesty. At the end of the table, Keita wore a sheepish expression. Man, now I kind of feel bad. The other 4 glanced over to her curiously as she rubbed her neck. See, I was the other one who voted for Yaomomo. She pressed her hands together and bowed to Izuku. Sorry, Midoriya, but I just thought she'd be a really good class representative since she's really smart and seems to know what she's doing. Oh, it's absolutely fine, Keita. Izuku assured. Honesty, I think Yaoyorozu really is more qualified than I am. In fact, there are probably a lot of other people in class who are more qualified. He shifted his gaze over to Tenya. Like you, Iida. Ochako eyed Tenya curiously. True. I mean, you wanted the position really badly. Plus, you definitely look the part, 'cause of the glasses. Everyone at the table couldn't help but sweat drop at Ochako's reasoning. Not sure if that's how we should be choosing our rep, but okay. Kyoka commented. Tenya cleared his throat and responded. I'm afraid that Jiro is right. Wanting a job and being suited for it are quite different. Serving at the Iida family's hero agency has taught me that lesson well. Hero agency. Everyone exclaimed in stereo, their eyes all now on Tenya. Hold on, what does your family do, exactly? Izuku asked intently. Tenya's eyes widened in panic, now realizing what he had let slip. It's nothing, really. Ya know, I've been wonderin' something about you. Keita said with a big, toothy grin. Come on, Iida, admit it, you're filthy stinkin' rich. I was afraid people would treat me different if anyone found out. Tenya let out a sigh as now all of his friends were focused directly onto him, hoping to hear an explanation. Seeing no way out, Tenya granted their wish. Alright, you see, the Iidas have been pro-heroes for generations. Tell me, have you heard of the turbo hero, Ingenium? Izuku immediately brightened up. I have. He's a really popular pro with 65 sidekicks working under him at his Tokyo agency, but then, Izuku's eyes widened in shock. Wait, don't tell me. Tenya stood up and placed his hands on his hips proudly. He's my elder brother. Holy crap, Iida, your family's famous. Kyoka asked incredulously. Dude, that's awesome, Keita added. Tenya nodded once again. Indeed, Ingenium is an unmatched commander who honors the hero code. He sat back down and smiled with conviction in his voice. As the second oldest Iida son, I strive to be just like him. He then craned his head in Izuku's direction. But I think it's still a bit too soon for me to enter a leadership role. After all, if someone like you can figure out what the judges were looking for on the entrance exam, Midoriya, you definitely are more qualified than I. A representative needs that kind of insight. There was a long pause with everyone staring at Tenya in surprise before Ochako spoke up. You know, I think that's the first time I've seen you smile, Tenya. Hey yeah, you should do it more often. Keita agreed. Tenya, however, tilted his head. What? I smile regularly. Kyoka chuckled at that, going back to her meal. Hey, yeah, sure Slim. Izuku let out a nervous chuckle before speaking up again, finally gaining the confidence he needed to get something off his chest. Hey, Iida, about the entrance exam. RRRRRRRRIIIIING. All of a sudden, a loud alarm began to ring out through the whole cafeteria, taking everyone off guard. Soon after, a voice was heard over the intercom. Warning, Level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. All at once, the entire student body in the cafeteria began clamoring toward the door, though Tenya took the time to actually ask one student about what was said. What's a Level 3 security breach? It means that someone's gotten past the barriers. The upperclassman answered. This hasn't happened in the 3 years that I've been here. Come on, we've gotta go. Chaos. Complete and utter chaos was what could best describe what was going on in the hallway leading to the emergency exit at that moment. The students were moving through it in a tightly knit stampede, with everyone practically being smushed together. It was far from orderly, and it was something that made both Izuku and Kyoka feel uncomfortable as heck. Gah! Hey, calm the hell down, would ya? Kyoka exclaimed as she felt someone push against her back. Izuku, where are you? Oh, over here. Izuku called out, waving his hand above the crowd so that Kyoka could see him. The rocker grit her teeth and inched her way through the crowd of jammed students, finally catching sight of that familiar head of green hair that she had grown so accustomed to seeing. Izuku wore a look of desperation as he extended his hand to her. Kyoka, are you okay? Kyoka winced as she forced her way through the crowd. I'm fine, Izuku, but... Whoa, watch out. All at once, Kyoka let out a gasp as she felt someone's back ram right into her, sending her stumbling forward. Izuku let out a yell as he brought up both of his hands, catching Kyoka, while resulting in both of them falling backward into the nearby window. Thankfully, it didn't break, but the duo were now quite close to one another. They didn't seem to notice, however, as their heads snapped around to whoever bumped into Kyoka. In the crowd, they saw none other than Denki giving them an apologetic expression as he and Eijiro were practically being swallowed by the stamped. Sorry guys. My bad. Damn it, Kaminari. Kyoka called back. Watch where you're, but then, Kyoka stopped mid-sentence when she realized just what was happening. Her eyes widened as she could feel her hands pressing up against a certain someone's strong chest, as well as a pair of hands having settled firmly yet protectively to her shoulders. A blush appeared on Kyoka's face as she slowly turned back to see Izuku, the green-haired boy's face mere inches away from hers as his green eyes bore into her violet ones. Their blushes both became much brighter, but Kyoka still tried to roll with the situation. MHA, in her mind, she was screaming at herself. Hi. That's the best you can do with this, Kyoka. Izuku gulped down his nerves and smiled back. Oh, yeah, MHA, he reciprocated. Glad that we were able to get away from the pack, alright. Hey, yeah, Kyoka said before glancing around, noticing that they were pretty much safe in this small section, the students all moving past them without them being carried off. Well, I'm not taking the chance of moving from this spot, are you? Not at the moment, no. Izuku denied. But we still need to find some way out of. Uraraka. At the sound of Tenya's voice, Izuku and Kyoka's heads perked up, seeing the spectacled blue-haired boy having been pressed up against a window that wasn't far from theirs. Soon after, they heard Ochako's voice shout out, Tenya, help me. Izuku cupped a hand over his mouth and called out, Uraraka. Where are you? In response, a familiar hand with small pink bumps on their fingertips rose up and waved. Midoriya, I'm over here. Please, someone help. Don't worry, Uraraka. Tenya shouted. I'm coming. He began scooting his way along the glass before carefully working his way back into the crowd, extending his hand toward Ochako's. Quickly, I have an idea. Touch my hand and make me float over everyone else. Ochako wasn't exactly sure why Tenya wanted that, and neither did Izuku or Kyoka, but knowing Tenya, the zero-gravity user figured he must have had a plan. Oh okay. The brunette extended her hand toward Tenya's, and while it took a couple seconds, she finally managed to touch it, using her quirk to make him float. Izuku and Kyoka watched as Tenya floated up into the air and then pulled up his pant legs, revealing the engines in his calves. Now, engine boost. With that cry, Tenya's engine suddenly flared to life and they began jetting him forward, while also resulting him spinning round and round in the air. In the end, Tenya made it to the end of the hall, stopping directly above the exit door. He planted his feet on the door frame and reached up to grab onto a pipe with one hand, pressing his other one against the wall for support. In the end, it resulted in him resembling one of those emergency exit signs with the walking man on it. This is it, Tenya thought to himself. Be precise, clear, and confident. He raised his voice as loud as he could and proclaimed, "Listen up. Everything is okay." Immediately, all of the students stopped and set their gazes up to him in shock. It's just the media outside. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. Izuku and Kyoka's eyes widened and they spun their heads around, seeing that, indeed, a whole bunch of reporters managed to get past the school security. Whoa, how'd they make it in? Kyoka asked. I don't know. Izuku admitted. UA's security is supposed to be some of the best. The quirk inheritor glanced down to his pocket and pulled out the tracer that Mei had built. Maybe it was for the best that Hatsume B built these. From his position, Tenya continued, we're UA students. We need to remain calm and prove that we're the best of the best. His words began to resonate with everybody there, calming them down effectively. It also helped that the police were now on the scene, and were immediately beginning to lead the journalists out of the school grounds. Once the hallway was successfully cleared and Ochako safely released Tenya, Izuku let out a hefty sigh. Well, I'm glad that's over. Yeah, so am I. Kyoka agreed. Who know this whole tizzy got started just cause of the media. After a few seconds passed, though, Kyoka glanced back to Izuku with a sheepish face. You can let go of me now. Izuku's eyes nearly bugged out of his head as he quickly removed his hands from her shoulders, his face ripening back up. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that. In his head, though, Izuku admonished himself, don't lie to yourself, Midoriya, you know exactly why. It's no prob, Kyoka assured as she moved away from their safe spot near the window. In her head, however, she added, but I certainly wouldn't mind you doing it more often. The perplet blushed and shook the thought out of her head, ushering for Izuku to follow her to the door. Now come on, let's go make sure that B's okay. I bet he's freaking out after everything that's happened. ZRKT, what the hell was that? Bumblebee exclaimed through his radio, his blonde holoform clutching at his hair as he stared worriedly at Izuku and Kyoka. ZRKT, I was worried sick. Both of the human teens sighed at B's concern, smiling all the while. They knew that the yellow mech was probably frustrated that he couldn't do anything to help them, but still, in hindsight, it was a bit of an overreaction. B, it's okay. Kyoka assured, putting a hand on the holoform's shoulder to calm him down. It was just the media, they just somehow managed to get past the front gate, that's all. B slumped forward in relief, wiping his forehead while his radio piped up again, ZRKT, phew. That was a close call. A little bit, yeah. Izuku nodded. I mean, it really could have been a lot worse. He glanced over to Kyoka with an apprehensive face. Could you have imagined what would have happened if actual villains managed to get past the gate? Kyoka let out a nervous breath at that. No kidding, if anything like that would have happened, well, the rocker shook her head, wanting to clear her mind of that thought. But let's not focus on that right now. What matters is that everybody's okay and things are settled for now. She craned her head over to Izuku and nudged his arm. Now come on, class rep, we'd better get back and get your term started. Bumblebee tilted his head. ZRKT, class, ZRKT, representative. Oh, it means class representative. Kyoka explained. Think of it as a kind of leader of the class. Plus, a student who's elected as the representative is usually in for some extra attention from hero agencies, so it's a pretty big deal. She pointed over to Izuku next to her. And you just happen to be looking at Class 1A's representative right here. The blonde brightened up and set his eyes on Izuku. ZRKT, really? ZRKT, totally rad. Izuku smiled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. Hee thanks, B, but I don't think that I'm going to be class representative for long. This earned him a confused expression from both Kyoka and B, leading him to explain, why you see, I'm going to be abdicating the position to Iida. B remained confused, but Kyoka wore a surprised expression as Izuku went on. When he was able to calm every single student down in that hallway, I had only reinforced the fact that he really is more qualified than I am. I mean, I don't think I could have done what he did. I really think that he could be our class rep, not me. Kyoka and B stared at him for a good few seconds before the perplexed chuckled, crossing her arms while shaking her head. Pine Tree, you are just too nice. She then gave him a wink. But you're right. Iida managed to calm everyone down like it was no problem at all, so I guess I don't have a problem with him being class representative. She then leaned forward and poked a finger to Izuku's chest. But just know that my vote will always be for you. Once again, Izuku's face broke out into a heavy blush, and he could see B snickering off to the side. Thanks, Kyoka. I appreciate it. No prob. Kyoka nudged her head back toward UA. Now come on, we've gotta get back to class. She and Izuku waved back to Bumblebee as they left. We'll see you in a couple hours, B. The disguised yellow mech waved back to them as they went inside, calling out to them. ZRKT, see y'all later, alligator. However, as soon as they were out of sight, a serious expression came to his face as he re-entered his vehicle mode, starting his engine before pulling out of the parking lot. He had seen the kind of defenses UA had when one reporter woman tried to cross the threshold onto the school grounds, and he knew that there could be no way to get past those kinds of heavy iron doors. This was something he had to investigate himself. Sure enough, the moment he got to the front of the school, he saw the remains of large iron gate, or at least part of it, having been utterly disintegrated. A shocked expression came to his face before a familiar voice called out to him, "Why, Brian? What a sight for sore eyes." Bumblebee's eyes widened and his head snapped up, confirming his fears. It was midnight, and she wasn't alone. Principal Nezu was with her as well, along with two other faculty members. One he recognized as Recovery Girl, the old woman who healed Izuku's wounds. But the other was, well, Bumblebee wasn't sure what to make of the other one. They were covered head to toe in what seemed to be a bulky space suit, but they also wore a pair of yellow sneakers that didn't go with their outfit at all. Their eyes could be seen through their helmet, but Bumblebee still wasn't sure who this person was. Midnight came sauntering over to Bumblebee with a sultry expression, the R-rated hero being careful when she stepped over the remains of the door. She put a hand above B's doorframe and leaned down, their eyes meeting while Midnight made sure that B was getting a good view of her once again. "What brings you around here again, handsome?" Bumblebee made sure to keep his eyes locked on Midnight before speaking through his radio. "ZRKT, I came, ZRKT, to inspect, ZRKT, the damage." "Ah, I see. Well, you should be glad that you missed all of the riff-raff that came through here." Midnight reached in and cupped Brian's cheek, making the holoform shake nervously. "We wouldn't want this face to be hurt, now would we?" The spacesuit-clad hero leaned down and asked Recovery Girl, who's that guy?" "Oh, don't worry, 13, dearie." Recovery Girl waved off. "That's just Brian. He's one of All Might's interns. He frequents UA's grounds regularly these days." "I see." 13 craned their head back to Brian before pointing back to the remains of the iron wall. "Brian, you didn't happen to see who did this, did you?" B shook his head, causing 13 to sigh. "Right, well, that leads us back to square one again." Midnight let out a sigh and returned to the subject at hand. "You're right, 13. How were ordinary members of the press able to bypass our security systems? Think this could have just been some freak accident?" "I'm afraid not," Principal Nezu said grimly, the intelligent mammal placing his hands behind his back as his eyes went to the disintegrated iron wall. "This could not have just been a random coincidence. Someone else must have been behind this. Some villain actually managed to infiltrate our school. But was this purely a show of power?" Nezu took a brief pause, and what he said next made a chill go through Bumblebee's entire being. "Or a declaration of war. Outer space, 18 hours later. Are we there yet, Shatter?" Dropkick exclaimed as he and his partner flew through the vastness of space in their alternate modes. It feels like we've been flying for a vorn and a half. Not far ahead of him, Shatter let out a sigh and mentally shook her head. She knew that Dropkick didn't exactly have the best patience in the galaxy, and in some cases, that proved to be an advantage, especially when it came to his interrogations and battlefield prowess. However, when it came to waiting for something, he was incorrigible. You know very well that isn't how long we've been flying for, Dropkick. As I predicted, it's only been a few orbital cycles. Yeah, but it feels like forever. Dropkick languished. Please tell me that we're at least getting closer to this. What did you say this planet was called? Earth. If Shatter could roll her optics right now, she would. No, the transmissions I've been receiving from this planet have made it quite clear, Dropkick. It's pronounced, Earth. Still kind of a stupid name for a planet if you ask me. Dropkick countered. I mean, it's like naming a planet, Dirt. It makes no sense. Well, in any case, you'll be happy to know that we actually are getting closer to it, in fact. Shatter focused in on the medium-sized blue and green planet that the duo were approaching, a sense of relief washing over her. Mainly because now, she didn't have to listen to Dropkick's constant badgering anymore. Here we are. Oh, thank Primus. Dropkick exclaimed before making a beeline for the planet's moon. I was starting to wonder if we'd ever make it. The red and blue Decepticon duo transformed and landed on the moon's surface, their optics staring straight up at the Earth as it rose over the natural satellite's horizon. So, what have you been able to make of this planet since you started receiving its signals? Shatter pressed her fingers to her forearm and a holographic screen popped up from her wrist. Well, apparently, this planet is home to organic beings that call themselves humans. On the screen multiple examples of humans began popping up, and not one of them looked alike. One appeared to have skin with a rocky texture while another one had star-shaped eyes. There was another who was entirely blue while yet another had weird protrusions stilling out of its head. Heck, one even had a bovine head. I must say that they have quite the variety of shapes and sizes, but then, Shatter switched to a picture of a relatively normal human. But most of them just look like this. Dropkick scoffed and commented, how bizarre. How are organics that are all part of the same race this different from one another? It seems like the human beings of this planet, at least 80% of them, all have something called a quirk, a special, unique ability that they gain during maturity. Shatter then brought up more pictures, these ones being of many colorfully dressed people, ones who appeared nice and others who were pretty threatening. It's gotten to the point where this world is one of heroes and villains. The blue Decepticon couldn't help but chuckle at that. Hey, what you know? Guess we ended up on another planet where conflict is seemingly endless. He crossed his arms and nudged his head toward Earth. So, what do we do? Something tells me that at least some of these beings can defend themselves against us. Indeed, it would seem that we would be better off going incognito for this operation. Shatter agreed. Once we make planet fall, our first priority should be finding disguises, and then we can start the search for B-127. Sounds like a plan. Anything else we should know before getting down there? Shatter's eye ridges furrowed a bit. Well, I have been intercepting signals from the island country that B-127 seems to be on. However, some of them are rather odd. The red Decepticon switched her holographic screen to show several different clips for Dropkick to see, the first containing footage of a small, yellow rodent with a lightning bolt-shaped tail blasting electricity at an orange, winged lizard, which was breathing fire right back at it. She switched it again, this time showing a team of people clad in colorful latex and matching helmets, posing weirdly with a huge explosion at their backs. Once again, she changed the frequency, this time showing a man in white clothes and a black belt riding a missile into space. One final time she changed it, and on the screen was a large, lizard-like monster with large dorsal plates on its back, and it was doing a rather odd, celebratory dance. Shatter turned off her holographic screen while Dropkick just continued to stare in utter disbelief. What the pit was that? I have absolutely no clue. Shatter waved a hand above her head. These beings apparently like to create some odd pieces of media for them to absorb into their collective cultures. It makes no sense whatsoever. And just like that, now I wanna raise this planet even more. Dropkick said before transforming into his alternate mode once more, Shatter following soon after. Now let's get down there and get this job done. Hokkaido, Japan, a few minutes later. Outside of a small, military outpost in northern Hokkaido, two officers were standing dutifully outside of the small compound, standing at attention as they focused on guarding the place. Interestingly, they both had a logo on their left pectorals that read, S7. It was almost time for their shift to end, however, so they couldn't help but fall into some casual conversation. So, what are you gonna do once you get off, man? Going to bed. The other one answered, rubbing his eyes at the same time. I'm surprised you want to do anything after this. We've been up all night. Yeah, you've got a point. The other officer agreed. Man, remember when we had some actual normal sleep schedules? PFF'd, a distant memory, my friend. The tired man let out a yawn, his eyes briefly moving up toward the still darkened sky, the stars only just beginning to disappear as the morning came. However, just as he did that, he saw two large, flaming objects falling out of the sky and toward their position, waking him up instantly. Oh God, hit the dirt. He dove at his comrade and tackled him to the ground as the two objects sailed straight over their heads and crashed into one of the hangars in the compound, one used for storing different types of armored vehicles. Instantly, the entire building erupted into flames, and the duo were left stunned at what had happened. Whoa, the soldier who had gotten tackled began to sit up, his and his comrade's eyes focused directly onto the burning building. Are we under attack? The other officer furrowed his brows. I'm not sure. The man let out a gasp as two sets of headlights suddenly began shining from the ruined hangar, before the owners of said headlights began speeding through the fire. One was an armored, red and black dune buggy with large rear wheels, while the other was a normal armored car that was black and blue. The duo of cars began racing toward the front gate, making both of the soldiers get to their feet and make a break for the compound's check-in building. Get out of the way, quick. The two hid just in time before both armored vehicles burst through the gate and then began to roll forward onto their hoods, only for them to suddenly change shape into two robotic beings. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHK. The red and black buggy's rear wheels suddenly folded up onto its roof, with its entire back end unfolding into a pair of legs. Its sides jutted out from the body to transform into its arms while the remainder of its hood folded down to form its chest, its head revealing itself soon after. The black and blue one had basically the same transformation scheme, the only differences being that its rear wheels were on the insides of its calves while two blue panels slid up from his shoulders, propping themselves up on them. The red one spoke up first, her cold, feminine voice sending chills through the two human soldiers. So this is Earth, how underwhelming. PFF'd, it's even more disgusting than I thought it'd be. The blue one said in a low, gruff voice. Now, where are those organics? Kolda sworn they were just here. The red one placed a hand on the other robot's shoulder. Focus, comrade. The indigenous life is not of our concern at the moment. The hiding soldiers watched as she pulled up a holographic map of Japan, its southeastern half lighting up. B-127 signal is coming from the southern coast of this continent. For now, we head south. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHK. With that, the two robots transformed back into their armored car forms and sped off down the street, leaving the two soldiers slack-jawed and in utter disbelief. Dude, one of them piped up. Do you know what this means? The other one wore a serious expression and nodded, swallowing the fear he was feeling at that moment. Yes, after 3 centuries, the NBEs are back. He snapped his head toward his fellow solider and gave him a nod. Contact headquarters at once. Get in touch with Burns, Fowler, hell, that whack job Simmons, I don't care who. Just tell someone, we have to prepare for what might be coming. Back on the moon, a certain red and black jet suddenly swooped down and transformed, landing on the natural satellite before craned her head up to the planet that was her destination. Windblade let out a sigh of apprehension and relief as she stared at the green and blue orb with a sense of hope moving through her circuits. There it is, the planetoid that Optimus was talking about. She clenched her fists and set a determined gaze down to it, a certain energy signal now appearing on her radar. And unless my scanners are playing tricks on me, B-127 is down there. And that means that the Ark, and maybe even Prime himself may be down there, too. She pursed her lips as she readied herself to make planet fall. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZCHK. In a split second, Windblade transformed back into her jet mode and blasted directly toward the planet, going as fast as she could without burning up in the atmosphere. I just hope I'm not too late. And it's the end of part 5 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.